Hi everybody and welcome back to Miss Angler's biology class. I am Miss Angler. In today's video we are doing the long-awaited November 2023 paper 1 prediction video for life sciences. I know you guys have been waiting and you've just been like hovering to see when I'm going to post it. It is here, so do not fret. I will always do these videos. But I also want you to know that I haven't seen the paper, so I don't know exactly what is in there, but I've had a pretty good track record these last 3 or 4 years that I've been doing this. I get about 80 to 90% of the paper correct and what I think is going to be there, but it's up to you to use this video rather as a tool for studying. Use it as a way to check if she's mentioned something, if I've mentioned something that you think, ooh, I don't know if I've gone over that, or do I know that very well? Use it as a checklist to go over those things and make sure you know them really well. If I don't mention something in this video, it doesn't mean it's not going to come up. It's just less likely to have emphasis on it. Now, speaking of which, how did I get all this knowledge? How do I make these predictions? Well, it's a combination between me being a life sciences teacher for many years. I also am a matric marker, which means I mark final papers at the very end of the year. And so I take these two groups of knowledge and my experience, and I kind of see what is the trend and what is the idea or the sort of look or vibe the examiner is going for year on year. I do need to say one thing that maybe you are aware of or you've picked up in your previous exams as you've written earlier on for maybe maths and history and physics. You might notice that the paper that you've written now is a little bit more different than what you've been seeing in the past papers, and that's probably because the examiners have changed, and examiners go through cycles, so we're probably at the end of a cycle going into a new cycle, and that's probably what we're seeing right now. And so because there might be a new examiner, there is definitely a higher chance of more, I want to call them curveball questions or new types of questions that we maybe haven't seen before. Now, throughout this video, I'm going to give you some example questions of what I think might be the style or the kind of question that they're going to ask. And I'm taking these from past papers so you can get a feel for it. Try the questions, see if you can do them, and that will be a great indicator as to whether or not you are ready for your final. Now, I have worked very hard on creating a Smart Start series workshop for you matrics to get you ready for your exams, and they perfectly complement this prediction video. It is available on my website, missangler.co.za. It is paper 1 and paper 2. Each video is 2.5 hours of me tutoring you, exam coaching you, giving you all my tips, all my tricks, everything that I couldn't possibly fit in a YouTube video. I have put it in there. Not only am I giving you my expertise and helping you get rid of the confusion on the sections that you are the worst at, I also give you access to questions I have handpicked that I feel that if you can answer all of these questions, you are ready for your exam. And I put them in 2 categories: recall questions, which will get you 50%, or application questions, which will get you 80%. If you can do all of those and you get them right, then you are ready for your final matric exam. So let's dive straight into the multiple choice section. Now, this is a section that you should be answering with some speed, okay, and some confidence, because you can get an easy 20 marks in the bag just with the multiple choice section. Now, the trend that I'm seeing for this upcoming paper is going to be an emphasis on a couple of different sections. Number 1, I'm seeing a lot more questions on the homeostatic functions and the endocrine. Now, what that means is I'm seeing a lot of things around, for example, the different endocrine glands and the hormones they secrete. And then married to that is homeostasis, because remember, homeostasis is linked to endocrine glands because endocrine glands maintain homeostasis. So we're seeing a lot of questions on those topics. The second thing that I think is quite prevalent in the multiple choice section this year is going to be the eye. Now, I think the eye is going to be heavily questioned in the multiple choice section because I think the ear is going to come later this year. And so they have to balance between the two. And I think they're going to put a lot of the multiple choice questions around the eye, specifically things like the eye structure, so like the layers around the eye, but also eye disorders or lens disorders. Now, last but not least, in the multiple choice section, there is going to be an application question. Now, you're thinking, what do you mean by application question? The multiple choice has a flow to it. It starts off with the first 5 or so questions being straightforward one-word answers, very quick, Then from question, let's say 6 to 8, is going to be slightly harder, but not incredibly difficult. Then questions 8, 9, and 10 are often application questions, and we are seeing a lot of tables or a lot of graphs, which means you have to interpret the information in the table or interpret the information in the graph and answer questions. And I think this exam is going to follow that exact same pattern once again. So let's dive into terminology. Now, this section is always a clear indicator of whether or not you are ready for this exam, because if you're not getting 9 out of 9, you are definitely not going to get 6 out of 6 or 5 out of 5 for those longer explanation questions coming on later. And that is because terminology is what gets you marks in those process and those application questions. Starting off this year, I think there's going to be a lot of reproductive strategy and gestation questions in the terminology section. So things like, for example, the word gestation, implantation, but also things like ovipary, vivipary, altricial, precocial development, all those words that seem to be associated with the reproductive cycle after fertilization has happened. Another word that I think is going to come up this year is going to be linked to gestation, which is a hormone linked to that, which is prolactin. This is the hormone that is responsible for producing breast milk. So I see that kind of theme running through the terminology. Moving into the second theme of words that I think is going to come up quite a bit is going to be the nervous system. But I don't think it's going to be eye structures and things like that. This time, I think it is going to be around structures of the nervous system, specifically things like regions in the brain, so the cerebellum, the cerebrum, the corpus callosum, the ventricles in the brain, the meninges, a neuron, a nerve, like the differences between that. I think that's the route that they are going, and also maybe potentially things like the divisions of our nervous system, like sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. Now let's move into the A, B, both or none question. Now I need you to get into the mind space of the purpose of this question. The purpose of this question is to determine, can you tell the difference between words that are very similar in either meaning or spelling? Okay, so now you need to think, what groups of words in paper 1 are similar in meaning or similar in spelling and often get confused with one another? Okay, so these are the key things you need to think about. Starting off with the words like corpus luteum and corpus callosum. Both start with the word corpus, but do we know what the second part of the word means? Maybe not. Another one, altricial development and precocial development. We get these two confused all the time. Likewise with internal fertilization and external fertilization, or vivipary and ovivipary, or ovovipary. We get these all confused with one another, and this is the way in which the examiner tests. Do you really know these words and what they mean? Another set of words in the A, B, both or none that I think might come up this year is amnion and chorion. And I think it's because we don't know the differences between the two, and we don't know their functions. Specifically, we don't know the function of the chorion in humans versus the chorion's function in birds and amniotic eggs. So maybe we should go back and go over that stuff a little bit more. The last thing that I think is going to pop up maybe in the A, B, both or none question is going to be hormones that we confuse with each other. And I think we often confuse ADH and aldosterone because we don't know which one does which. Now, this is a key little fact I want to give you. ADH regulates water, aldosterone regulates sodium, but together they regulate osmoregulation. And so that's actually a perfect A, be both or none question, because it lends itself to being a both question if they asked you what a hormone or something like hormone responsible for osmoregulation. It's technically both of those hormones. So let's dive into the slightly longer answers. Still in question 1, this is where we start to see diagrams and we have to answer short, quick, identify, label, state, those kinds of questions. And the first question that I think is going to pop up is potentially going to be a gamete question. I'm going to call this a basic gamete question. It'll be an egg cell or a sperm cell, something about these two structures, how they function together, or exclusively just maybe a sperm cell. I'm leaning towards more of a sperm cell in this one, but it could also be the egg cell. And we're going to ask questions about like, what structure is this? Where is it made? What is the process? Is it spermatogenesis or gametogenesis or oogenesis, depending on the picture? I feel like that's definitely the lean in that we're going for. And if they don't just do a sperm cell on its own, they might end up doing like a testy, and then you have to label the testy and then answer questions about what gametes are made in that. So I think that's the vibe we're going for. The next thing I see in question 1 is going to be a basic eye labeling diagram. They bounce between the eye and the ear every year. Let's get into the nervous system in question 1. I think we're going to see a reflex arc. They haven't done a reflex arc question in forever. Now let's get into question 2 and question 3. Now, all of these questions that I predict and how they're going to come up, I don't know what order they're going to come in, so they might be in question 2 or 3. Definitely the new examiners from 2020 to 2022 have been doing a lot more application questions, so you need to expect to see a lot more like paragraph questions where you have to read about maybe a medical condition or a newspaper article. So linking into these paragraph questions that they may give you is something around fertility. It has been now a new type or style of question to ask about fertility. And they seem to take turns. One year it's female fertility, one year it's male fertility, and they sort of bounce backwards and forwards between the two. I think this year they may lean a little more into male fertility. So they might have a question around how maybe the way in which, let's think, certain diseases can lead to infertility in men, and then their vas deferens is blocked and cut off. Maybe there's scar tissue, and they talk about, are you still fertile? Are you not? Do you still make hormones? Do you not make testosterone? That kind of thing. Another thing that might be linked into that, because remember, they are allowed to ask these questions under the endocrine system as well, not just the reproductive system, is looking at female fertility with luteinizing hormone. Now, I'm going to come back to the female reproductive system because they're going to get a different question later. Definitely, there will always be a female hormone question somewhere. But I think if they're going to ask you about fertility, there is only one fertility hormone, and that's going to be the luteinizing hormone. Now, a new thing that we are seeing in question 2 and 3 is a bigger emphasis on reproductive strategies. And no longer is it just diagrams. No. Now what we see is we are seeing more application questions. We see it in, like, for example, we had tuna one year, we had seahorses another year, we've had, I think it was pike, which is a type of fish. And I think what they're trying to do is they are trying to apply what we learn in class to real life situations. This year, however, if they do go down that road of asking you about internal and external fertilization and like applying it to a real situation, what they haven't asked for a very long time is anything about amniotic eggs. To me, that's very suspicious. That's a red flag. That means that potentially we may see some questions around the amniotic egg. Now let's get to the female hormone question, the menstrual hormone question that I know you are all dreading and you're thinking, what are they going to ask? Because this is always like the hardest question in the paper. I think we're going to have an emphasis on pregnancy this year. I feel like we're going to see something along the lines of, how do we know this woman is pregnant? And you're going to look at the progesterone levels. Maybe they'll ask you a question of, well, if she is pregnant, what is preventing another follicle from being produced, or how does she maintain her pregnancy? And that is where the hard part comes in. You've got to talk about negative feedback between FSH and estrogen and progesterone, and how FSH must be low for progesterone to be high. I also think we're going to see an element, because we're focusing on pregnancy, an element of implantation. And so what I mean by that is, how does a zygote go to a morula, and then a morula into a blastocyst? Now let's get into the application question for the endocrine system. This was difficult for me because I was thinking, what endocrine application questions have they not done in a hot second that they're not going to do again and again, and they sort of like go in between, like they decide to do it sometimes and not. And I think this year it's going to be thyroxine. But, and this is what makes it so hard, they take thyroxine and then they marry it to another hormone that does a similar job, which in this case is adrenaline. How does adrenaline affect cellular respiration in the same way thyroxine does? The examiner they love a cross-topic question, guys. They love that. They love asking two different kinds of questions and overlapping them into a bigger question. Next in our question, I am seeing a homeostatic control question around ADH, or antidiuretic hormone. I'm thinking maybe the question might go along the lines of, how do we regulate water, but like maybe on a hot day? Because then what they can do is they can ask you a homeostatic question on water, but they can also ask you a question on thermoregulation. The next question that I see coming up in this exam is around the nervous system. And for me, I feel like they haven't asked the pupillary mechanism in a hot second. And that's like a red flag for me. Accommodation has been again and again and again every year. And sometimes I feel like they ask accommodation a lot because it requires you to have a little bit more understanding. Now, a continuation of a longer eye question is definitely something about the lens being, a different shape, or using corrective lenses. They are loving these questions recently. Things like myopia, things like astigmatism. They're really liking these kinds of questions where they give you the eye, they don't tell you what's wrong with it, then you've got to identify what's wrong with it, and then how do you fix this problem. So that seems to be another recurring theme that we might see in this exam for the eye. Let's dive in now to plant hormones. Now, I know that you hate this section, and I feel like it's because it has something to do with the fact that the questions can never be predicted, because there are always application/investigation questions. So in other words, every year it's a new investigation question, it's a new application question. Then you need to be on top of a couple of things when it comes to plant hormones and these kinds of questions. Number one, you must know your scientific method. We must know what our aim is. And remember, we always take the aim from the opening statement where it says like, to determine, to investigate, a group of grade 12s wanted to know how, etc. That's the aim, everybody. You need to know your independent and dependent variables, which remember you only take from the aim. Do not take them from the table, okay? You only take them from the table if there is no aim statement, to know how to do validity, reliability. And so again, I think that's why we detest these questions. So if you are comfy with scientific method, what kind of like content? I think this year they are going to ask you a geotropic question. The other plant hormone question that I think is going to come up, which is in line with new examiners, is they are asking more and more questions on the other hormones. I think they might ask a follow-up question on gibberellians. There could be like a little graph there, like what is the level of gibberellians over time inside a seed? Now, the last and final question that I see coming up in paper 1 has to be about the ear. And I spoke about it at the beginning of the video. I said there's definitely going to be some kind of ear question that is a little bit harder. Number 1, amplification. They haven't asked a question about amplification. But I also think another thing that they haven't asked in a while is maintaining balance and posture. And remember, that has to do with the semicircular canals, but also the utriculus and sacculus. Those structures have been ignored for a while now. Now, the last thing that I want to add to this video is not necessarily a question on a topic, but it is two styles of question that can fall into any content. And that's why I want to just brief you on these. And that is, you will always be asked to draw at least one thing in an exam. And generally it goes, if you draw a graph in the first exam, you will probably draw a structure in the second, and vice versa. If you draw a structure in the first exam, you'll probably have to draw a graph in the second exam. With that being said, that means you need to be prepared to draw a line graph, a bar graph, or wait for it, a pie chart. Yes, you heard that right. Now, last year I said in my prediction video, well, they haven't asked it for a really long time, and I didn't mean for everyone to go into a flat panic and like, oh my gosh, I'm going to draw a pie chart. And funny enough, in response to that, I actually made another video, which is in one of my playlists, about how to actually draw a pie chart. It is in one of the grade 12 past paper exam question videos where I actually teach you how to draw a pie chart. The final thing that they like to include is a little bit of maths. And I know some of you took life sciences hoping that there was going to be no maths, but a new question that we see, a new style of question, has to be percentage increase or percentage decrease. They love asking this question. It's really the new hot thing, okay? How do we calculate this? So this is the basic formula. If you are calculating percentage increase or decrease, all you need to do is take the final amount, subtract the initial amount, divide it by the initial amount, multiplied by 100, and that will give you a percentage. And yes, that means it might give you 300, 400% if it's a percentage increase, or it can also give you a very small percentage increase because it might be a percentage decrease, right? So maybe it's decreased by 20% or it's decreased by 30%. These questions often carry 3 marks with them. So often, if we don't know how to do this, it's 3 easy marks we've missed out on. Now, I have included a couple more past paper questions that I thought would be useful for you to go and try, as I see that some of these may pop up in this final exam. And if you like this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and make sure you're subscribed, and I'll see you all again soon. Bye!